You get things like mesons or whatever, and if you have secondary materials, you can get nuclear reactions with those that can produce thermal energy. So what you're looking at here, you're going to see a more advanced version of tomorrow. It's going to be a fairly chunky session. What I want to do is give you those eyes so that you can compete with those that have been following my work for a little time in finding those sacred geometry structures.
You might as well stand over here so we can...
Yeah, it's quite bright, isn't it?
No, you were in the slide.
Even worse. So this is a presentation I would urge you to watch the original on the MFMP's YouTube channel called The Monopole Clutch. I think it's one of the most important presentations I gave. I'm going to pull out a couple of slides from this, a couple of slides from some other presentations, so you can understand how I got to this sacred structure. I never intended to go down this route. I was just trying to find out, you know, which knobs to twiddle to get excess energy, okay?
Just remember to go slow.
Yes. So what you're looking at there is potentially 5,000-year-old libation disc. It's in, I think, the Metropolitan Museum in New York. So as I was saying, the Monopole Clutch, it's a video that I highly recommend you see. It's a presentation that I originally wrote to present to the Russian community. What you're seeing on the screen there is a libation disc about 5,000 or so years old. It's in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And
what is libation?
I'm going to tell you. It's used in ceremonies, and you fill it up with fluid. I would suggest probably water, but sometimes people use oil, but I would suggest water in this case. And then you pour it over the head of someone. Right? It's kind of like baptism, but not, right? Now, does anyone know what this part of the carved sculpture is?
It's a square.
Yeah? But in Egyptian hieroglyphs, what is it?
It looks like an ankh in a square.
Now, the ankh is right, but I'm asking for the bit that isn't the ankh. Okay, so it's the ka, and that is the spirit. Okay? So by putting in here, you're capturing the spirit, and it flows into here. It goes through the loop of the ankh, and then out through the mouth. It is exactly and correctly the proportion of the type of monopoles that are produced by that cavitation reactor that I mentioned of Shishkin. The type of thing that comes in the Birkeland currents at the top in the polar regions. It's the type of thing that gets produced by very fast spinning metals. You take a cone of metal and you spin it at 5,000 RPM, something comes out and it exposes, this is an X-ray. But this specific one, produced by Perevoschikov, he took a Petri dish which was sealed with ordinary oxygenated water. He placed it into sunshine for around about 10 days. He then brought it in and he took a standard like 400 ASA film, black and white. He then took a 5 milliwatt laser and shot the laser at the water, and behind the Petri dish had this film still rolled up, still in the metal case. When he developed the film, he found these structures. The same structures produced by cavitation and by other, and you're going to see other technologies that produce this. Now what you're looking, they call these, in this particular paper, they call them little mushrooms. In Shishkin's work, they call them birdies.
Is this because the field of energy was so strong in the water that it imprinted it on the film because the water holds energy?
Very specifically, the charge clusters, the static electricity, these kind of pseudo-magnetic monopoles get bound to the oxygen. They stay with the oxygen. They make the holy water, right? When you hit it with the high energy coherent light, it dislodges them from the paramagnetic water and they come out. At this point, they're still like these monopolar structures. They're relatively neutral. Now what happens is they fly into the silver-based gel they go neutrally through the metal of the case, sometimes multiply through the cellulose of several rolls of film. But after they've been through enough silver is the most conductive element. Now if you imagine you've got a little silver particle, around that you've got a sea of electrons. And these things are toroidal moment structures, and they can get excited by other toroidal moment structures, specifically electrons. They grab the electrons, they get excited, they get destabilized, and they go. And what you're seeing is them spraying it out. And very specifically, it looks like this. So you have a torus there, the torus blows up, and it still sucks electrons in here, which exposes the film here. But it also sprays them out of the top. And because it's a film, you're seeing a slice through it. Okay, so it really does look like a hubum, mushroom, yeah? Okay, and this might be something pulling in. The two bent arms that frame the three sides of the dish are red ka, the word for spirit, in ancient Egyptian. The loop and the knot are red ankh, meaning life or to live. The spirit doth give life. The combination could be interpreted as the phrase, life to thy spirit. Now for Egyptians, everything below this line represents the key to all hidden knowledge. That is the key below there. That is representing the monopole, in my view. They knew this, or whoever invented that symbol knew this, and that is what it looks like on a film. The proportions are identical. So I'm going to talk about this paper. If you go and look at this video, in the description of the video, there's a link to a PDF. The PDFs have all the links to the relevant documents. But in 2017, the CIA declassified some documents on their website. I looked into those for things like cold fusion. And there was one paper, it was a report from a news article in 1992. And as I said at the time, the funding was removed from all of these scientists, so they started speaking about what they did. And in this particular instance, 1992, remember 1989 was Pons and Fleischmann. This is just 3 years later, okay? The title of this newspaper article was Journey to Alpha Centauri. It's one of the closest habitable potential or planet-bearing solar systems to us. It's 4.6 light years away, I think, something like that. And in this, they said it was reported the so-called cold fusion was discovered in the United States and it could not be explained. And the reason was because they were trying to find the features of fusion reactors and they cannot find them in these devices. And they described that their technology was not fusion, fission, or energy from the vacuum. They specifically said, we are dealing with a phase transition and we extracting the inner energy of the matter. Remember what I told you. Electrons on the outside, protons and neutrons in the center, and this hidden energy within the matter in between, this thing that regulates the relationship between the coherent condensate and the electron shells and keeping everything in order. It said that this can be extracted not from water but from, say, metal. The electron accelerator connected into the circuit turns the converter into a space propulsor. That is, The device that takes this energy out of matter is actually the same device that allows for propelling the spacecraft through space. Using it, one can reach Alpha Centaurus and return back to Earth in 12 years. To do that, you need to accelerate to 0.8 of the speed of light. And decelerate.
Which means you come back how many years later?
Let's not get into that.
What was the comment?
It's to do with relativity and shifting in time. The energy concealed in 1 kilogram of iron is quite sufficient for this interstellar journey.
So are you selling tickets?
I'm going to show you the actual technology, and it was published before this was released by the CIA. We mentioned Leonid Oroitskiev. He was a mainstream physicist, and he developed the gamma camera that weighed 2 tons that flew over Chernobyl. It was on the world's largest helicopter at the time. They're just a few hundred meters. They did not find any uranium core. What they found was in the entire reactor, even inside the ultra-pure graphite blocks, there were newly synthesized elements and also uranium, without the brittle graphite blocks being broken, and all kinds of weird effects, like massive tanks shifting from one part of the reactor to another, pieces of huge metal intersecting each other impossibly. And when they initially went into the reactor, there were glowing balls moving around.
You're speaking about which reactor?
Chernobyl, in the Ukraine.
A few years
So they-
afterwards, yeah.
No, this is in the cleanup operation.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah,
enough.
when they were assessing where the core was. It did not melt down, there was no China syndrome.
Co se děje a díky tady té kameře viděli věci, co se tam dějí, nicméně ty věci se jakoby neměly dít.
They could not explain it with any standard mainstream physics.
Vysvětlit fyzikálně.
It was at this point that Leonid Oroitskiev joined the Ball Lightning and Cold Nuclear Transmutation Research Body.
What did he do?
Ball lightning, ball,
Kulový blesk. Kulový blesk.
and cold nuclear transmutation, which is what they call this field in Russia.
Studený nuklei.
What you see here is the top of a chamber.
To je vrchol té komory.
Below here, you have a water chamber, sealed. You have a titanium foil.
Tam je titanové fólie.
You also have a metal casing. Here you have a mirror at 45 degrees.
Zrcadlo na 40 stupňů.
When they detonate the electric charge through this titanium foil, a ball lightning appears above the device. And they can see it as from above and from the side in this same photo. In a few milliseconds, the ball lightning splits up into thousands, tens of thousands of little ball lightning and dissipates. He used iron 57.7 meters away over here with a north pole of a standard magnet behind, and at 90 degrees, another 57 iron at 0.7 meters with a south pole of a magnet stuck behind. Another sheet of iron 57 in another room as control. Iron 57 has a nuclear magnetic resonance. You don't really need to know what that is, but for the control sample, it was bang on. For one of the poles, it was one way, and for the other pole, it was the other way. And it lasted for 2 days. This means magnetic charges were synthesized by a thing that looked like ball lightning to start with, from exploding electrical discharge going through metal in water, and was bound into a magnetic material. This is what I'm saying. When you are doing these processes that are highly energetic and they can create these clusters, they can get bound into the paramagnetic oxygen. You can breathe that in, or you can drink that in. Yeah? These aren't perovskitovs, they are Shishkin's X-rays, which I've just colored for the sake of this slide.
magnetic charge cluster, and then they switched off the machine, and you said it remained stable for days.
No.
There's a difference on the
Yes.
but there, at least
Again, 2 days. They typically last for 2 days when they're made in rapid processes. Yeah.
it was a question for that maybe it's relevant here as well. I asked myself, what is the coordinate system, so to say, which keeps this cluster at that point? So if the phenomenon somehow connects to the ether, and the Earth is moving, and the solar system is moving, everything is moving, why does it remain in that very spot in the coordinate system of the root?
No, you're talking about yet another system that lasts for 2 days, which we will talk about.
Okay.
But these things, when they're made with a coil of a coil of a coil, typically last about 2 days, and it's called an electromagnetic phantom. Okay. So he talks about magnetic charges here. I've just in text there described what I've just said. Now, when you have a monopole meeting a proton, it can cause the proton to disintegrate into energy. Why is that important? 2 deuterons coming together to fuse. This is fusion, right? 25, let's say, million electron volts. CO2 coming together, 5 electron volts. Not a lot. Not a lot. That is combustion, right? Not a lot. Fission, uranium-235, get around about 200 million electron volts. So which is bigger per nucleon? Easily fusion. That's why we want...
Repeat please the name of the material and the number of
Okay.
from the last sentence.
At the bottom, carbon, oxygen, oxygen, chemical reaction, 5 electron volts, approximately.
Opací reakce 5 elektronů.
Uranium-235, the most unstable primordial isotope, 235 nucleons, yields around about 200 mega electron volts from a fission,
200
million electron volts. Yeah, a lot more. Fusion, roughly 25 million electron volts from making helium. If you have a monopole tearing apart one baryon, either a neutron or a proton, you're getting of the order of about 930-40 million electron volts. It's 133 times more energy per reaction of one baryon than you get from fusion. Very specifically, a guy called Boyd Bushman, who worked with Yin's former boyfriend, John Hutchison. He speaks about John Hutchison's work. He speaks about anti-gravity. He then speaks about a whole new type of field. He then speaks about the neutrino-verse, and he then talks about what his company that he worked for, where he created the Stinger missile and he created the magnetic beam technology that he had a patent for, and he still has a patent for. An energy source that Lockheed Martin were working on, which was way, way beyond fusion. When you put all those things in the same conversation, and only those things, you can only conclude they were making monopoles to rip matter apart using neutrinos.
So how do you capture the energy?
Well, if they mostly come out as electrons, or enough of them to make a deal, you know, then you capture the electrons. The rest of it, you're going to waste a lot. There'll be a lot of neutral particles. And also when you break up a proton or this is a microwave reactor called the Nova. We have a much more advanced one, which we'll show you tomorrow, called the Supernova, and we're going to run this groundbreaking experiment to see if we can convert carbon-14 rapidly into normal carbon. Basically, you've got a magnetron there. We're going to do this, and this is the reactor working here. It's fused quartz there, melts at just over 1,700 degrees centigrade. And you can see the charcoal here. There's a magnetic component that was separated with a magnet. And then we take that under the SEM, You shouldn't use paper, by the way. You get calcium, little flakes, and it contaminates your sample. And we found iron-rich crenellated microspheres. This was in 2016. It's the first time I saw it. And they had these little eyes, and in this little eye, here, it had a carbon sphere. I didn't understand that at the time. I do now. And you've got stellar synthesis of elements. 2 carbon is magnesium. Carbon and oxygen goes to aluminium plus proton. Calcium is it's called dec alpha, it's 10 alpha particles. Iron is basically the fusion of 4 oxygen 17s, goes to carbon and iron 56. So here's our little structures here. These are very large. Look at the scale here. This is 500 micrometers. So this is nearly half a millimeter, this one, but we got lots of little ones. I never realized until much later we actually have one with a hollow hole in it, which is a signature of these processes. This is what I mean, the little carbon sphere. And this is because of the substructures that's going on. This one will be pulling in, and that one will be pushing out. It's also on here as well, you can see. I didn't understand them at the time, but I did understand that they might be significant in the future. Loschak monopole is the name that there's a French researcher called Georges Loschak. He had a concept for this, but he said that these were excited neutrinos. So this is an experiment by the sadly departed Neil Crichton Gold, a guy I worked with for several years. In here we have diapads. These are 3M abrasive pads that you use for scraping the edge of a tile or glass when you cut them. Okay? They're taken off. They are heated to remove all gas at 200 degrees for about a week, and then they're put in deuterium oxide for about a month. Those are then taken out, and we have a copper coil here, and then we have a Cantal heater coil, and this is fused quartz in between. This is an iron bolt. The iron bolt is focusing the magnetic field through the center of the reactor. When we look at the reactor at this point, after a reaction, we see several structures that are mirrors of each other. They don't seem to care about each other, but there's collections of them. And we have these kind of structures where you have like a cannon going across a valley. That's the North Pole, that's the South Pole. It's the North Pole, the South Pole. That's the North Pole, the South Pole, and I've got them blown up there. Okay? The North Pole typically has a hole you can see, and the South Pole is like a splat, it's kind of going in. And these are like solar prominences, and they are between a magnetic north and a magnetic south pole of the monopoles. So I have a little model here, so you can imagine it. So it kind of goes like that. Yeah? So they're in the materials and they produce these things. When one of these structures breaks up, it can cause the copper oxide, in this case, to be broken apart, and it's produced this track. And the reason is, and this took me a long time to mentally work out, this substructure is built onto a bigger structure. And the big structure has a regular array of these things, and as it spins round, the substructures are smashing in as the overall structure is moving in this direction. This was witnessed for the first time ever, and it's the most detailed strange radiation track up to this point that was ever observed.
What was it?
It's a strange radiation track. Yeah. It's a name given to it by Leonid Oredzkiev.
Like the railroad track?
So if you can imagine a torus, and attached around that torus is a whole bunch of these things, and as that's moving this way, it's also rotating. It's smashing in, and these are also rotating. And binding energy of this matter is so dense that ordinary matter just does not matter. Okay? So I've given a kind of like a mock-up of what it is. I've got the model down there. This is from Bogdanovich. Now Bogdanovich, he had water jet onto metal, 2000 volt pulses through the outside of the water jet, through the water vapor. And afterwards, on video, he observes toroidal structures glowing, moving around on the metal for how long? How long, my friend? 2 days.
What was the voltage you had on?
About 2000 volts. Simple experiment to do. Do it, man. I really would like to capture, because I've been asking him for the videos and I didn't get them. On the quartz that you saw outside the Lion reactor, we have these structures. These are the same poles. There's one pole, a one pole, a one pole, and it's sweeping. And this doesn't melt until you get to 1,700 degrees. The reactor only ever got to 1,050 degrees. Yet, there's this extreme damage to the quartz, and there's no damage in the center. Right? So these are south poles, they're pulling the material in. These are north poles, they're pushing the material out. And this one's actually an angle, so you can see that it's the beam that's coming out is actually interacting with the glass. Where you've got the things rotating the same way and they interact, you get interference so that there's actually no damage to the glass. Again, these are two norths, these are two souths, clustering together. This was on the glass as well, and this is fractal. It actually has vortices within it, and it has a yin and a yang structure. So essentially they typically arrange themselves sometimes like this, one over the other, kind of like that, but it's probably like that, if you know what I mean. Okay? Or it might be like that. You can see that this is largely hexagonal here, and that this split from the center is 120 degrees apart. That gives you an idea of what the substructures are. This was on the other end of the reactor, outside of the reactor, on the outside of the fused quartz. It is a vortex and an anti-vortex. It comes from here round. There's a live video where I take this reactor apart, and you can see this thing being revealed for the first time to me and everyone watching the live stream. And there's this structure was in the dead center of this one. And when we look at that, we see a tornado on the top. There's nothing on the bottom. That shows you that the flux came from one side and down onto the other. In there, we have this, which contains calcium. There's no calcium in the material. You constantly see this material being synthesized, DEC alpha. This is the flux, as you can imagine, between the two. And this is standard hydrodynamic flow. A vortex and an anti-vortex, so like that. That's radius to over that center point, that radius to that center point, okay? This is the Vesica Pisces. This is the first time I saw this. The first symbol of the Christian church, okay? Now watch. This is from the 1950s. This is an aileron in water with dust on the surface. So now, one of those wonderful 1950s science videos. This is the structure that we found on the reactor.
Would that be considered like a wormhole connecting to...
Yes, it is a wormhole. And I'm going to show you a sample tomorrow where you can see that it is a wormhole. We've gone in with an SEM and we cannot see where it's taken all the copper from one side, where it's generated a map of the Pyramid of Giza. I kid you not. And it's taken the copper and it's pushed it through a wormhole and it's splattered out and left half of the sacred geometry on the iron underneath. So my journey wasn't through I'm looking at sacred geometry, does this explain the science? My journey wasn't, I'm looking at a load of maths and this is how nature works. My journey was, this is how nature works. Oh, this looks like hydrodynamic vortex. Oh, now it looks like the sacred geometry, and so on.
Question, is the yin and yang always at the same level of the fractal toroidal moment, or there are the n and the n plus minus 1 level?
At every level it's got yin and yang. Within a yin and yang, within the yang there's yin. And
At the same level you get the material. So at the very same level, there is a point where material is destroyed and created. So
there's, yes, inside each substructure. Yes, yeah. So actually here I'm talking about how, so this was published in 2003 by Urotskoyev. At Pripyat, by the Chernobyl reactor, thousands and thousands of people in Pripyat observed strange glows above the reactor. This was not Cherenkov radiation. What this was these clusters binding into oxygen into the air, and when the air was then ionized, it produced the wrong photons. The same thing I was telling you about earlier, but on an extremophile version. Weird, totally weird lights. It was witnessed by thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. Normal air does not ionize like this. Okay, we don't need to. Okay, so this is one monopole we produce with a Marsa gas, which I talked about earlier, which is a type of Brown's gas. And here is from Aalto University. This is a synthetic Dirac monopole in a Bose-Einstein condensate. They've created a synthetic model. We've produced it for real. And by the way, this is all copper here. And over here it's zinc. And there's only like 2% zinc or something in this 10 yen coin. Why is the copper all on this side? Because it's spin isotope and it goes, and you'll see that over and again. And that's why whoever's technology it was, I was telling the lady over here, this is copper on this side. So the toroidal moment works with copper because of its spin isotopes, and that's why placing copper allows for the opposite, like it's equal and opposite, the copper will pull the chi in as well. So on this side, when we look under the microscope, it looks like this. And I saw these little trails, and I went into the little trails, and I found this area was copper oxide. But these little snowballs, like you're rolling a snowball and it's getting bigger, you know what that was? It was sulfur. Sulfur is the fusion of two oxygens. Little ball lightnings had formed, and probably over a period of 2 days, they'd consumed the oxygen and synthesized sulfur. That is fusion, right there. That is nature, just from a natural process that can happen in nature when you have lightning, synthesizing from oxygen sulfur. Sulfur is a critically important element in biology, if anyone's eaten an egg. So here's an impact of one into structure here. The PAP engine was based like this. I'm going to move on. These are all different technologies that were based on it. S.V. Adamenko, he learnt the Soviet method of cold nuclear transmutation in the 1950s. In 1999, he got access to the old Soviet isotope factory outside of Kiev. And he built the Proton 21 lab using 300 joules of electricity, dielectric barrier discharge, relativistic 1/10 of C into a target, any metal in the periodic table, synthesizes all of the elements in the periodic table. The first experiment worked, and every subsequent experiment for 10,000 experiments. In 2015, $4 million came out from the heavens. The device was transferred to Chicago, Illinois. No, Illinois, or anyway, America. Between 2015 and 2017, it was verified. under a company called Proton Scientific. And then the Proton Scientific website was taken down in 2019, and it was shifted to the US nuclear fusion program in Brookhaven National Laboratory.
So it was kind of stopped.
No, it wasn't stopped. It's very much continuing. It's just now you can't see anything about it.
It went dark.
Yeah. It worked, so you can't see it. They're happy with everyone seeing stuff that doesn't work. So essentially, this was an interview on 2006. He's talking about a process called secondary ion mass spectrometry. You hit a material with a heavy ion, and it smashes off an ejection field of other ions. They will drift, and you can detect the mass of those ions. What they were finding on this accretion disk around their target where the electricity went into, on the accretion disk, there were some of these spots. And when they hit them with the primary ions, they saw no matter coming back at all. And you know what? They weren't even seeing the matter that they were firing at it with. And so they turned off the equipment to see if there was something broken, and under the phosphor screen, they saw this glow in the center of where they had been targeting, which decayed exponentially. Essentially, they'd made a black hole. It was consuming the original ions and converting it into photons as it went past the event horizon. This pattern also relies on production of black holes, magnetic charges, and this is the pattern that we're relying on to do direct matter to electricity. But I want to show in Solin's patterns from 1992, the patterns that he identified and sketched into that awarded patent. What do you see? This shape here. All of the things that we had produced in the Lion reactor and in other experiments, he had already drawn into his quantum coherent nuclear reactor that relied on the production of magnetic monopoles, their aggregation into spheres, inside which nuclear reactions occur, and according to him, due to the collection and aggregation of dark matter. So, us, him. Ken Shoulders, him. Us, him. Us, him. Us, him, us, him. Us, him. This is in a Mars's vibrator. And this is how fast nuclear reactions can occur. This is PTFE. What is PTFE? Yes, what does it contain? What elements?
Fluorine.
Yes, and? Carbon, very good. Okay, it's a polymer of carbon and fluorine. And what we've done is we've loaded it up with a Mars gas, and this happened. That's the experiment's over. Did you see it? Right? That was titanium. We just put some on. It blew a huge hole out of it. And this is what it looks like here. This matter formed instantaneous crystals. That is what it looked like under the SEM. So within the coherent matter collapsed and produced micron-sized crystals separated by spaces, exactly as described in Solin's 1992 patent when the coherent matter collapses.
Ferns.
Ferns, yeah.
Ferns.
Yeah. So,
It's a matter of interest. Could you just go back to your slide with your brown? I just wanted to see what you...
oh yeah.
We will have a short break soon. I'm just curious about what you've got to say about the man. I worked with his protege in Australia for 20 odd years. And we developed what was called ecoglobalfuels.com. if you want to check out that website, ecoglobalfuels.com, it's everything that you can do with Brown's gas potentially, right? In the sense of even making synthetic fuels and waste disposal and all sorts of things.
Waste disposal, first point. The most startling claim by the inventor in the press, this was in the 1980s, was that the gas produced in his process can reduce nuclear and toxic waste to harmless carbon. What do you see coming out of this? Carbon. What was he doing? Point electrode discharges using lead in potassium hydroxide in light water. When you have an AC discharge in water, you create HHO. HHO is brown gas. When the brown gas does its business, you get this. This alone is an experiment that you will see tomorrow being conducted, and we'll have a look maybe in the future at analyzing the sample that we will create, and maybe we'll see these little lead balls spewing out carbon where there was no carbon in the reactor. So brown melted at small chunks of that steel and aluminium with a piece of radioactive americium, and basically 99% of the radioactivity was gone in a flash. What is happening there? The aluminium is able to capture, like the titanium did in the previous experiment that I just showed you a video of, the clusters. The clusters are then binding to the iron. When the iron goes above its Curie temperature, around about, I think 700 or 800 degrees or whatever it is, all of those clusters bound then to the iron are released at exactly the same time as the magnetic property of the iron fails. And what does that lead to? The same kinetic energy and in exactly the same phase. We create coherent matter, we create a ball lightning. The ball lightning has a toroidal moment, it sucks in that americium and gets rid of its radioactivity because it goes into the core and it comes out as carbon.
I've done this reaction and it's amazing because steel and aluminum don't normally mix, but as long as you keep the flame on it, they're fine. They just sit there and they all bubble together. The second you pull it away, boom, just blows into a million sparks.
I mean, aluminium is fantastic because it is a single isotope. So if you want to create coherent matter from aluminium, you've already got the de Broglie wavelength. If you get them at the same kinetic energy, they can always get very quickly into coherence. Kenneth Radford Shoulders, who worked at Stanford Research Institute, was brought in by one Harold Puthoff to investigate the work of John Hutchison, who was a Canadian individual who, for various reasons, couldn't hold down a normal job. It's fair. And so he was on government support, but he was very physically strong and had a keen mind. He just wasn't good in working in normal workplaces. He had the opportunity to go and decommission 2 Canadian warships, and they wanted to pay him, but he said, no, I'd lose my benefits, so can I just take home anything I want? I said, okay, all right, that'll work. So he was taking home all the electromagnetic countermeasures and radio equipment and everything, and radar dishes, and piling them up in his burnt out room. Right, Ian? No, but that before he was in a burnt out room.
You know that too?
I know that, yeah, he told me that story, or you told me that story. And Ian walked in and says, I'm not going to stay asleep in here. Right, you're coming with me. We're going to go and find a flat to rent. So the very famous flat that you see with all of the things on the balcony, it was Yin that made sure that happened. Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen there is a very famous sample, which is a steel knife which teleported into a block of aluminium. And it took me a long time to understand this. I hypothesized when I first had access to it that it was captured clusters and they were bound to the magnetic ion in the steel. Because Ken Shoulders said that these things could envelop things. And once they've enveloped them, they will not allow the material inside to express its charge outside. George Eagley, who I spoke about earlier, the expert in ball lightning who went to America in 1983 from Hungary, he gave two examples to me when I was with him in India. One, ball lightning moves into the sphere of the person recounting this experience, and out of it came a gallon of water when it broke. A separate example, ball lightning came into this person's experience and it failed, and out of it came a load of sand. Load of sand, little particles of silicon dioxide. Okay, for those that know, don't answer, but what does that tell you? Two very, very important things. One, the inside of ball lightning is lower than 100 degrees. Two, in both cases, the material's mass was prevented from being turned into weight. That is to say, the action of gravity did not occur on the stuff inside the ball lightning until the ball lightning failed. Now we know ball lightning can walk through walls, which means it would also shield the charge, which means you can teleport things. I have recently looked at this under an SEM and found yin-yang structures of the correct and ordinary quantized size and iron-rich crenellated microspheres only in the boundary. These are signatures of the process, and you're going to find that out. So I dedicated this presentation to Vladimirovich Dubovik. There he is. This is a panic meeting in early 2018, 19, something like that. In the same room I gave a presentation in the Moscow Friendship University in 2015, very same room. Many of these people are generals and former top scientists in Russia. And he's saying you need to be very careful when working with this technology, because it produces a disruption beam here and it extracts the chi life force out of you. How do you think Nino Kulugina was able to stop a heart? These things are coherent matter. Here is a beam from a blowing up ball lightning in an experiment in Holland. You can see it's not diverging and it's two twisted beams coming out. That is a coherent matter wave. Here are more coherent matter waves. This is coming out of a blown up ball lightning. This is three frames linked together. These are three individual structures, and they don't care about the anode or the cathode. They only care about each other when they're in a sphere of influence. They don't care at all, and then they care everything. Like this one is moving around here. We can look in...
I'm sorry, are they always balls, or are they always spherical? When we're talking about...
These are ball lightning, and what you're seeing here is the half non-radiating boundary. This is the bit that appears above the metal. The actual magnetic structure, which you'll find out and see what that is like, well, if you can imagine the toroid, yeah? There is a toroid, and it's stuck halfway into the material, okay? And you're seeing a sphere, a hemisphere. There's actually, the other hemisphere goes inside, yeah?
The reason why I took those electrodes out of the tubes of the Therify is because they did that and turned into goo and moved things.
Into goo?
Yeah.
Ooh. Can you send me some of that goo?
It's like oily goo.
No, I want the goo.
And there's also this iridescent.
Is it black? Is it black goo?
There's reddish, well, close, but there's also iridescent film on the forms of the glass. There are little beads of oil that look like they're iridescent in the sun.
Wow.
I don't know what that is, but I'd like to know.
Let's find out.
Yeah, all right.
So what we've been able to do by using actually that very camera there, because it's got 14.5 stops of exposure capability, dynamic range, and because we can do very fast frame rates, we can actually look into one of these hemispheres and actually see that it has a substructure. In this one, you can see how these structures are interacting with each other. Now, these are ones you can see. These devices that you're making sometimes are producing billions of these things that are flying off in all directions, but you can't see them because you're not in a low-pressure plasma environment, right? So you see how this one's moving around here and it's causing it to do a U-bend, and this is what's most amazing to me. Look, that one there, before it goes off there in the next frame, it's actually causing the one ahead of it to move around its forward-pointing direction, which means it's projecting a gravitational wave out in front of it. This one is projecting a gravitational wave out in front of it in the frame before, and it's causing this one to move around its beam in front of it.
So the frame is very fast then.
Yeah. Winston Bostick, there he is. By 1957, proposing that this could be the basis for the structure of all matter from the subatomic to the formation of galaxies. In 1957, Los Alamos National Laboratory, Princeton, totally taken completely seriously, right? Funded by the Department of Energy. It may be, Dr. Bostick said, that these magnetic fields repel the magnetic fields surrounding other galaxies which are in the process of formation. Thus, for the first time, we can begin to understand the mechanism that brings on the expanding of the well-documented expanding universe. This is what I was saying. Titanium, deuteride, plasma ring, reconnects. This is your current going around this way, and your colloidal magnetic field. You fire multiple of these together. This is 8, forms a torus of tori. Ken Shoulder's book, 1987. We forced this to become not a secret anymore. Basically what it says here is there's non-radiating electromagnetic fields, but there is scalar and vector potential. This is a paper in Nature Materials from 2016. This is 1987, 2016. They still don't know what he knew then. You understand?
There's one other thing we must say about that. There is emerging in the last few years, and has emerged in orthodox science at an advanced level. What I would say is the very beginning, but it's moving pretty fast, theory of force-free fields. And these are getting very close to what Tesla was doing. They haven't added any way back in yet, but they're getting close. At least they're eliminating the overall force and doing something else with the electromagnetics that remains.
This is Nail Crichton Gold. This is a reactor we looked at earlier. On that reactor, I showed you some other structures, these flux loops. Here, we have a tube spot in the center, a circular structure, and a beam out here and a beam out here. I'm thinking, this looks self-organized to me. And then I see one with 3 structures. And then I see one with 4, like a swastika, and I see one with 5. You have to really look for those. This was in India, and I'm looking at an ultrasonic tank here in Suhas Ralkar's lab. Suhas Ralkar. And I'm seeing a soliton, a solitary wave in a toroidal form. And as this is moving, it's got vortices going around like this. And it actually has helical substructures coming in at regular spaces. Can you see the helix there, the helix there, the helix there, the helix there? So that tells me that there's something here which is causing a vortex here. Not only have we got a vortex here, but we've got something that's causing a vortex here. Right there. This is when I realized we are definitely looking at something that's hydrodynamic. I saw this and those other things that I showed you in the previous video with the circles overlaid in the same year. And this is like, okay, this is hydrodynamic, but then there's electricity involved, and then this is polar molecules. What am I actually looking at here? You're going to see this tomorrow, if you haven't already seen it. This is the ultrasound cavity where you can see these things chasing each other. Here's a still. What is causing this depressurization? Basically, these are nanobubbles that have come out of solution from the water. The way this works...
The new arm for running a waste-to-energy plant is an innovative model in the fields of waste management and energy.
Pause that one. What you're seeing here is some point in here, there's all of the pressure going in, somehow, because this only is white when bubbles are formed because of depressurization. I'm shining a light and the light is bouncing off the bubbles. Okay? Same here. This means there's a disruption beam that's pulling and depressurizing this. And you'll see in here, some of them suck in ones from behind. You'll see one and it sucks it in from behind. Zoom. Wait, maybe yes. Yeah. There you go. They're joined up together, those ones there. They like to assemble, they like to live. This here is a way of getting rid of toxic gas from this power station. I think it's in Norway, and they put it into a soliton and pulse it out, and it travels right up into high atmosphere. Rather than having to have a very tall chimney, they just create a soliton and pump it up like that. It's very clever, actually.
The solution to pollution is in dilution.
There we go.
Don't you think that would be used more often?
Yeah, it's a really novel idea, and it's great. So we're going to show these, hopefully tomorrow, in the pub. Now these aren't charged particles, so these don't do the magic. These are just smoke particles, but they do show the flow dynamics. And in this case, there is a spread beam laser, like you use to make lines on walls. And it's shining through into a dark room into one of these, so you can see how the matter is condensed into the central rings there, the sides of the ring. We found these structures here in this spark gap, which we inherited from Neil Crichton Gold. You can see how this is. There's no plastic. This is from the 1800s. It's one of the first communication devices ever. And on here, we see the signatures of exotic vacuum objects. It's the oldest sample man-made thing that shows these processes. Charge separation is the key, and in the Shack-Paronoff generator, this is a simulation using Tesla processors. You have a positive vortex and anti-vortex, and here you have a negative vortex and anti-vortex. It's a pulse of charges going around a Mobius strip. This is hundreds of years before Christ in the Finland's National Museum. It has the vortex, the anti-vortex, and the bridge joining the two between the monopoles. Don't ask me why they do that. So this is the system. It was done in the 70s and 80s. This is a yin force because it's creating a zero albedo sphere here. And it's sucking the energy in and condensing that energy into whatever's going on in here, which is producing a little bit of light. This is breaking matter up. It's a yang, and it's projecting the energy out into a place in space-time. These two make terrible, terrible weapons, but if you know how to use them, you can make them useful energy generation technologies. This allows for single bath thermal extraction. What does that mean? I can go into an environment where everything is the same temperature, and I can suck all of the heat out from over there, and I can bring it over here. This, I can create something that looks like a sphere that moves around in the sky very quickly, like a ball of lightning. Looks like a UFO.
How do they make crop circles then? Because that's what they find.
Yeah, because this will rotate and this will rotate. So, and you know, the structures that make these things themselves will look like these glowing things. So, if you generate one of these toroidal moment structures, and I'll show you how that is, they will create a twisting vortex. And because there's water in the nodules in the crop, it's going to manipulate that water in weird ways.
Oh,
It actually converts it to like a cold steam. And so the nodule expands and it just flops over, but it doesn't damage the plant because it never got hot, it didn't cook it. Fake crop circles don't have these nodules, they've just got broken stems. So phase singularity is very, very important. This is one of the most important concepts here. When you have your toroid, okay, and you've got a vortex coming in here and round here, like I showed you in those images of real fluid dynamics. Because of the substructures, which you'll see in a minute what they look like, you also have the vortex coming in here. It comes into a phase singularity, yeah? It doesn't go all the way through. Some does go through, depending on where it is, but it's the phase singularity that's important. What is that? You can go round and round and round and round and round, and it doesn't go up. Or you can go the other way round and round and round and round, increasing the phase, but you're not going down, okay? And this is the phase diagram of a vortex soliton. These things, which I was showing you earlier, yeah? The same thing occurs with a Mobius strip, which is what is being used here to create this effect.
Which strip?
Mobius strip. Take a strip of paper, rotate one bit 180 degrees, join the two ends. Has one surface. So what you're looking at here is the Mobius strip, and the current is going round, and it goes round twice, and it comes back to where it started. It's a bit weird to think. So what is a toroidal moment? So we got our little Bostic structure here with our current moving around, like we saw from those things forming and firing from either side of the chamber. Yeah, current moving around. And it produces a magnetic moment. Now, you rotate that and you have at least two. This rotation, that rotation. And then you have a magnetic loop. Not a current loop, but a magnetic loop. And you do not get an electric field here, you get a toroidal moment. It's electrodynamically different. But things can bind together using these, and they are binding together using those here. The toroidal moments can link together, like the magnetic moments could link together, and this creates a second order toroidal moment. And this can go on ad infinitum to an n-level toroidal moment structure. This is in in Science, 2011. Copper atom, copper atom, copper atom, copper atom, oxygen atom. Current loop, current counter loop, toroidal moment. This is just 5 atoms producing a toroidal moment, right? That is exactly what that is. That's in copper oxide, this is copper oxide, that is copper oxide, this is copper oxide. This is theory in 2011, this is us making very large ones. Same with this. This is an even larger one. It looks like eyeglasses, and there's very good reason. That's what they look like. They start to make this shape. So the minimum you need is a vortex and an anti-vortex. So that's a blown up one. That's my blog's logo. And in one of those situations which I described earlier, where my blood pressure goes up and my heartbeat goes racing and I get a headache and I have to get out of bed in the middle of the night, I sketched down this. A vortex coming into a magnetic pole, and then this kind of structure, having seen this and the things going on in that ultrasound tank. And then later in 2019, I was doing a maser gas on tungsten in Japan, 2 or 3 seconds, and we have a vortex and an anti-vortex. And then we have this sphere, which is strontium, not in the original material. This is a diamond wavy line in this circle, only on one side, because it's twisting over. This is the torsion. And the chi is floating up. The hidden energy of the matter is coming in and driving this process, as is the matter. It's ripping this apart, alpha by alpha particle. And it's coming into here with the yang and the yin, or the yin and the yang, one or the other. And there's new elements synthesized in here. Typically the elements in your body. Typically the elements in the crust of the earth. This is when it clocked to me that this is magnetohydrodynamics. It's like the hydrodynamics in that smoke, it's like the hydrodynamics in that water, but it's magnetohydrodynamics. It took a little bit longer to realize that it's magnetohydrodynamics in water as well. Hutchison sample, black hole, this one. This is where the monopole would fit, so in these different samples. So this led me to understanding what the basic structure of what I call O, which I believe is the God's toolbox, little g. Okay? It is the normal hydrodynamic vortex with two rings with your Visa Capices intersecting like this, and then a half radius here. That produces the basic structure. This is that triangle that you were talking about earlier. It turns out that this is at the top of the destruction point here. If you draw a circle and then you divide that circle by 1.618, the golden ratio, it produces this triangle. Now, there is an inner circle here that I only just found out recently. All I was looking at was Coptic Christian pillars from Sudan, south of Egypt. And I saw that they had the Chi-Rho, the cross in the center, the Maltese cross in the center, and that they had a vortex one side and vortex the other side, right? And the Coptic Christians took the Egyptian tradition and knowledge and combined it with what came from Jesus, and they came up with the Coptic Christian tradition. They slightly modified some of the symbology. I knew that this had to be D4D because that's what I was seeing under the microscope. That is what Bostic saw in his experiments and published in 1980, right? This had to be D4D. So I had to find a radius of a circle that fitted here 4 times across here, and then I had to center one of them and delete one. This is how I built it, right? No mass, no understanding of sacred geometry, just what I was seeing under the microscope, and then being a little bit inspired by people who lived before us. I found out 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, that this circle is exactly and precisely this circle divided by 1.618, the golden ratio. In fact, the distance between here, and the distance between here and the disruption zone, which is here, which is here, which is here, is exactly the golden ratio. In fact, many, many aspects of this entire structure, this is the golden ratio line, this is constructed from golden ratio circles coming in. This is why we have that to that to that to that to that to that. This is why these structures are in your face. Literally, we are built in the image of this technology. Sentient beings on any planet in the entire universe, in however many universes exist, will tend to our form. We are built as the answer to the program that runs the universe.
Our form as human beings versus other types of
sentient beings will tend to look like us. They might be varied by environmental conditions or local gravity conditions, but they will tend to look like us. So Star Trek was not lazy, just putting stuff on people's face. I used to think they're really not trying with their aliens, are they? Because they all look like humans, there's just got a bit of stuff on their face, but actually they probably do look a bit like us. Because we're the answer to the program. You know, same here, as Tesla showed when he stood with his foot apart at this angle with 2 ball lightnings in either hand, showing this structure. Very famous picture of him. Now, what's weird about this is that this is exactly the yin-yang. It's also, if you take this and know that your spirit, Holy Spirit, flies through here and it goes through with torsion, 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 torsion. That's the caduceus, by the way, the disruption beam, 2 beams spiraling in, right? Then that is Chi-Rho, 2 Greek letters. Chi, chi, the spirit, the life force, Rho, flow with torsion, density, flow, torsion. He was given the name Christos, Ichthos, Christos, Jesus Christ.
What's the role, please? Can you
He was called Jesus, but he basically worked out what everyone else knew before, and he was given the name Christos.
Okay, and what is the meaning of the rho?
Of what?
It's a letter.
The rho is density with torsion, with twist.
Christos is also the anointing from the initial vessel you started with. It's the title, the anointed one is the Christos.
Right.
That's where we get Crisco oil after Christos.
It will all tie in. You see, I didn't know that, but it will all tie in. Everything that these crazy elder people knew thousands of years ago is not so crazy. Sorry. Just.
Can you say that this phi is vortexing itself by when you increase or make it smaller.
You're going to see that.
But it will never actually, and that this also creates polarity and creates
well, this is the structure that is negentropic. In fact, there is only two structures in the universe that are negentropic. The vortex and the ring soliton. And the ring soliton is made from at least two vortex and an anti-vortex. So, does the vortex create the soliton, or does the soliton create the vortex? It's the chicken and egg. It's the ultimate chicken and egg.
When you talk about torsion, actually this torsion is maybe this vortex.
It is, yeah. Torsion is the vortex. Yeah. It's a vortex.
It's also the reason why the wizard hat has the rim of the vortex.
Put it up! Do you like it? Okay, so how I came across the next step in my journey was with a sample that I will be able to show you tomorrow. And under, using a $1,500 microscope and stand combination, Dynalite, I saw 4 quantization levels, but it's only necessary to see 3. And anyway, at this scale, it's not really very clear. Yang and a yin structure. Take one of those, doesn't matter which, it'll just create the variant. And you create this, you rotate that around. So these are the same scale, you take that, you rotate it 90 degrees and put those around there. You get a wheel made of wheels. That is the same as that. I'm just looking at the apple core that's made. So, where is it? Here, I'm looking like that. And here, I'm looking like that. So I'm seeing the bit that goes through the center of the apple. This is actually the wrong aspect ratio. It should be D4D. Should get a better prop. You take this one and you rotate it another 90 degrees and rotate that around there. And there are 48 sections on this one. That's just as it was. And that was looking at our John Hutchison sample. Now the interesting thing is the aluminium is not swept. It's not spinning. It's just a footprint, like a footprint in clay. Yeah? It's moved the aluminium around it. It's jellified the aluminium. So I came up with this structure. A wheel within a wheel within a wheel. As above, so below. The substructure here, this is why you only need to do 3, is self-similar to the overall structure. It took a long time to work out why 48 is the maximum number. That has been worked out. But you need a minimum of 2 at every substructure level.
How did you work that out? Did you have to test it?
No, I measured it off here. There's 48 divisions.
Oh, well.
Yeah, and I've never seen anything bigger. And now I understand why, because of the substructures that are built in the cores. They can't be any more than 48, it just falls apart.
I've seen this.
I saw it there. But I've seen it in many other places too. This was just the first. I'm talking about how only from physical observation I came to understand the structure that you're all going to be looking for around this on buildings in architecture in order to try and win a prize or 2. Right. So these are bound together with the toroidal moment in whichever axis they were. Now the incredible thing about the toroidal moment as opposed to electromagnetic waves is electromagnetic waves, you can basically have the wavelength, you can use the frequency, and you can superimpose over a carrier wave, you know, a modulation on that. And then you run out of kind of, it becomes more difficult to, you can rotate it as well. There's a couple of ways you can do it. But the reason they go to digital is because you can do more with it, with the same electromagnetic waves. But with a toroidal moment, right? Has anyone got just a little bit longer? Just something like this? Okay. So what Vladimirovich Dubovik calculated is that if this is actually a D4D structure and we've got our toroidal moment, these are the ways you can encode. Stop laughing.
To do that again.
I haven't started and you're laughing. I'm worried about how this is going to go.
It was funny before you started.
Right, okay. If you could get your minds out of the gutter. This can work like this. There's one way. Try not to laugh. Okay. Come on now.
Science.
It's deadly serious. So you can do that. So you've got amplitude in which you can do that. And you've also got frequency. So you can do, or you can do, then you have this. Then you have your pitch. And the pitch can go in and out by a different amplitude and also different frequency. Okay? Then you can have the angular speed. So it can be going in and out, up and down, different frequencies and round. Right? Per number of fractal toroidal component substructures, per fractal level down to twice the Planck's distance. You understand how many phenomenally massive ways you can encode information. And because the quantum coherent condensate is a toroidal moment structure, you can put that information in there, and if you don't have the genetic code, that wheel within a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, that coil within a coil within a coil within a coil, that is your DNA, which is your cryptographic key to encode information into the Akashic record. You can't access that information, but I tell you what, if you've got that cryptographic key, sorry, you can access the information at any point in the universe instantaneously. And if you've got a twin, they have access as well. And if you're in a bloodline, you kind of have partial access. Maybe if you've had some psychedelics and your brain goes off its prescribed ability, you might pick up an experience from a dinosaur being chased by a bigger dinosaur 1 billion light years away. And it goes straight into your consciousness and you're going to try and work it out with your frame of reference. This is an incredible way to encode information. It's where all information will be encoded in the future, but you already do it with your brain.
Have they attempted to do that with the supercomputers? They haven't really used that concept at all, have they?
So Hal Puthoff, who ran the Psychic Spy program and is at Naval Intelligence, he was having an interview in February last year with Eric Weinstein. Eric Weinstein was talking about the only way to overcome the speed of light was to use the Aharonov bomb effect, which we're going to talk about momentarily. The Aharonov bomb effect came from 1954. Sorry, Aharonov bomb.
Far for me.
Okay.
It's kind of, I don't know what you're talking about. You guys were having an interview over being faster than the speed of light.
Yes. Two guys. They were talking about how to get faster than the speed of light. They talked about this thing called the Aharonov bomb effect, which allowed for what you needed to go through the speed of light. And what was your question again?
Have they used any?
Yeah. So
developing the supercomputer.
So how?
Storage.
Yeah. So this is supposedly described to Hal Puthoff as a means to get around the restrictions of relativity. And Hal Puthoff responds, it's almost like he's in a different conversation. It really looks like they've cut the conversation. He says, and you can go even further than that. There are all kinds of toroidal geometries which have no electromagnetic propagation of waves, but they only have scalar and vector potential. I have 2 patents which I am leveraging now to develop communication technologies. So I went quickly online and I came up with 2 patents, or 1 patent, from 1993, 9 months after he handed over the Psychic Spy program to Science Applications International Corporation. It had a coil and an anti-coil with 2 electric plates. And when you oscillate those and you energize those fields, you create a toroidal moment. And do you know what he needed to detect at the other end? A Josephson junction, which is a quantum device. And we have a quantum device in our brain. This technology allows for direct manipulation of someone who is stupid enough to have a number of members of their family hand over their DNA.
Who has a number of
You just need 2 members of your family to hand over their DNA, and then they can manipulate your brain at a distance at any point in time, wherever you are. The new 5G antennas are toroidal antennas, and they specifically have, for the first time in them, the bands from 21 to 24 centimeters of light. And when Science Applications International visited John Hutchison in the 1990s, they said these were the frequencies that allow for ESP and yaw effect. Extrasensory perception, i.e. telekinetic processes. Psychotronic weapons.
10 to 15 minutes later.
Okay, so I just need to work through the development of the structure.
And I'm leaving like 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, all right.
So 10 minutes with you, 10 minutes for questions.
Okay. And my machine looks like it's overheated. Okay, so this is angular momentum. This is the Technical Museum up the road here. Gyroscopic effect. That's kind of what you need to understand this one, and we're going to try and explain so you can see the toroidal moment and how it can cause phase coherence and energy coherence. Now what you've got to imagine is there isn't a hole there, there's only a dead end right here. And instead of these metal washers, there's electrons which repel each other. So if this one's moving around here, it's going to push that one round until they're exactly 180 degrees out of phase. And as they get in, they get in, they get in, they get in, they become Cooper pairs, which are then not fermions, they're bosons. And then that allows them to aggregate into a magnetic core. And the magnetic strength builds up, builds up, builds up, and reaches out in this torsional field that can yank anything in it wishes to. It results in this. This is from Aalto University. This is the topological monopole. This is what we were talking about yesterday, and this is the thing that does the business. This is Bostic's work, D4D from 1980s, tori with tori, made from plasmoids joining together, tori, you know that produces a toroidal moment. This is Guions from John Archibald Wheeler. He was the teacher of Feynman. He worked one of the main people in the Manhattan Project. 1954, this paper. He didn't really understand how these things could stick together, but they didn't understand the toroidal moment back then. This is one of these structures that they got very, very excited about in April 21, a Bose-Einstein condensate creating a hexagonal type structure with substructures in it. Not very high resolution, I grant you, but you know, it's glad that other people are catching up. This is what we produce in our reactors, and these are the structures colliding with fused quartz. That's the anode sheath there. And as Henk Jurjen zooms in here, we go into one structure here. And we're coming out, we're coming in. Go on, Henk, you can do it. There we go, it's coming into view. That was a toroidal moment structure. Then we found these actual collapsed wave functions of these toroidal moment structures. These are always calcium oxide in this instance, which calcium, oxygen and calcium oxide are all paramagnetic. They can live within this intense magnetic field. This is copper and this is carbon, both diamagnetic. They orbit around it. This is why you get carbon rings deposited when these things collapse. So we had this structure I derived from Neil Crichton gold, this from the John Hutchison sample, and these the first example of the collapsed coherent matter wave with the carbon around here. I sent this off to the Russians at the end of the month, in the last day in April. 1 hour later, a no comment back. This is the coil within a coil within a coil that was sent to me. And they described this in this paper from 1995 in exactly the same way I described this in 2020. Electric current, magnetic field. They didn't quite get the toroidal moment in this, but anyway, these are a group of these around here clustering. This is a group of a group, wheel within wheel within a wheel. We've created these things. They produce what's called a non-radiating boundary. It's spherical. That is the ball lightning boundary. In this experiment, and I will show you this sample, instantaneously it removes a copper sphere section out of this copper pipe. And look, one of the most thermally conductive metals, very sharp point. This is not thermal. And on the boundary level on the SEM, we have a 2-order structure, minimum, that's what you need with a vortex. We have a 3-order structure with a vortex. We have a 4-order structure, a swastik, and it's not a vortex. The swastik is the first time, the swastika is the first time that the God-controlled power becomes under control. 3 no, 2 no. 2-bar spiral galaxy, yes. 3-bar spiral galaxy, yes. 4-bar spiral galaxy, don't really get. Then it starts to become circles. Hexagon. Hexagon is perfectly under control. This is it in 3D. 2, 2, 2, 2. This is the swastik. This is the 0 level, the n level. This is the n-1. This is the n-2. And as you can see, at every level, you need the vortex here, 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 and here. And the point of disruption is exactly at the point where the torsional field interacts with the fractal level in the universe above. In fact, according to that Russian paper, they agreed with what I'd already said, but they had obviously said it before in Russian in 1995. That the fractal toroid is the only fractal that can fill all of space-time without leaving any branches or gaps. It is the only possible fractal that can be a model for how space or the ether is configured. And so when you are making these structures, you are directly talking to the way the universe is structured. Back here, when they pass an AC 30 hertz signal through there, they get an alternating magnetic signal forming in here. When they turn it off and they move this away, you still have that alternating magnetic field, and it lasts for 2 days. Why? Current going through a wire, pointing vector goes off, dissipates. Current going through a coil, pointing vector comes off and it dissipates. Take your coil, wrap your coil into a loop, pointing vector comes off and dissipates. But if you have a coil of a coil of a coil, the pointing vector closes into a loop and you get what's called an electromagnetic phantom or vacuum current. It exists quantum locked into the local space-time that it was made. It's not necessary on any ordinary matter. It's necessary on some matter, but neutral matter. Neutral matter, can we guess what that might be? Yeah, maybe cold neutrinos, it's a candidate, yeah? So that can exist, and you can pump energy into that. You can pump energy into that. And in this paper, it says when you get above a certain threshold, it can capture vacuum fluctuations. It can capture 0-point energy. Secondly, another paper by a guy working at Stanford Linear Accelerator. It's a place in California. Stanford Linear Accelerator.
Well, it doesn't matter anymore, you know, we are going like machine gun. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, I'm running out of time.
Yeah, but just little gaps between the sentences.
Yeah. Okay.
Just slow down.
Yeah, well, you know, Roger, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
He's speaking about something that happened. We don't
Yeah.
understand what happened.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, fine. So,
you just need to finish up in 5 minutes.
yep. They said that when you get these structures, these fractal electrodynamic structures beyond a certain energy level and level of clustering, it can cause baryonic matter to decay. Now they don't, protons and neutrons, to fall apart into their raw energy. So he's describing something that's acting like a magnetic monopole, because that's what they can do.
I've had that time delay thing where I'm running a coil on a bench, and then I'll take it apart and move it elsewhere, and then accidentally set my computer right on the same spot, and it scrambles.
Yeah. That's what's wrong with your computer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is where the tornado is touching down on the outside of a reactor, causing the steel to glow orange.
Who was that taken?
That was taken in Holland. These are the things it does. Every electron interaction can be overexcited or energy extracted from it. So you get anomalous glowing, transmutation, non-thermal plasticity, material flow, critical fragmentation.
So you are saying you're getting excess heat there?
We may be, but it's not set up for that. We're just observing macro effects and learning to control them in this reactor predominantly. Production, capture and coherence of matter waves, collapse of matter waves into different configurations, so you get different elements. Basically every way an electron can interact and hold matter together and form bonds, it can just change those. These are different things that it can do: material processing, cutting, grinding, gasification, cold forming and molding, element creation, transformation including remediation, release of hidden energy within matter, which I've described what that is and how it's released, condensed matter conversion into other forms of energy, communication without barriers. I've given a little overview about how this same structure can do that, transmission of large power over thin wires, shielding and propulsion.
What do you mean by shielding?
I mean that the structures, you saw that I showed you that a sphere of material was completely removed instantaneously from a copper tube, right? We've done that with other things. Now, if you can erect that structure around your vehicle and you can maintain yourself in there, you can energize it up to a point where, as a nuclear missile comes in, it will be disintegrated at femtoseconds, as atom by atom, as it comes into that structure.
A bit like Star Trek's putting up the...
That's exactly what it is. Yes, exactly what it is. You can download all these presentations, any detail you need. That's the pattern I was talking about earlier from Hal Puthoff 9 months after he handed over the Psychic Spy program. These are the magnetic vortices and anti-vortices in the brain in that 2015 paper using cognitive tasks. This means you can control this, but it also means they can control you. High power on a wire. This is the structure you're all going to be looking for. This is the matter changer. This is our replication we are working on. And what is going on here in this 1969 water spout is you have a toroidal structure up here, and this is the disruption beam coming down, but what you're looking at is a fractal toroidal, and you've got another toroidal in the ether here, and that vortex of dark matter that's causing that very fast movement when the actual wave propagation is this way, is actually on the torus in the ether on the level above. This is the propulsion I was talking about, 1979, downloaded from NASA's website. It has every single key thing they revealed in Congress in this 1979 document about UFOs. It literally says this is built on what we think UFOs do. Current loop, current loop, current loop, current loop, current loop, current loop, toroidal moment structure producing a phase singularity into which you can cohere matter. This is the propulsion proposal for NASA in 1979 based on UFOs. It's a toroidal moment structure for intergalactic travel. This is electro-discharge machining. This is a technology you can go and buy that uses this principle, and I proved it. Within 90 seconds, these are the hemispheres moved from the non-radiating boundary that cut through up to tungsten carbide. Here is a copper sphere, carbon sphere, the carbon wavy tail and the carbon on one side. The same structure. The same structure cutting through iron. This is us on metal that is indium, melts at 156.6 degrees, turning to a jelly with a Marsa gas. People say it's so hot it can vaporize tungsten. Yeah, but this is 70 microns thick and it melts at 156 degrees, but it's turning to a piece of jelly and flapping around like a piece of rubber. It ain't hot, it's weird. It's weird. Weird. Yeah, it's like this is John Hutchison. Alec Pizzero came in. That's loading it with charge clusters that are changing the way the electrons behave, holding the metal lattice together. So it turns it to rubber, and that's what happened with this aluminium sample. Because this was glowing yellow-orange, not because it was hot, because it was at 700, 800, 900 degrees, but because of the structures were building up on the paramagnetic aluminium. And for a depth into the aluminium, it turned it to a jelly, like we have replicated, right? John Hutchison turned off the power, and then Alec Pizzaro came over and went to pick up the metal, which he said was colder than the ambient air to touch. And he left his fingerprints and smeared it with his thumb.
That reminds me of the monk or the Buddhist guy who put his handprint in the rock. Yeah.
Probably something same.
Right? Molecular.
Well, the rock may be high metal bearing rock, but it doesn't need to be because these things, so what it is, last point, I think it's all right, we need to have questions and go, right?
No, we're not going to do questions.
Oh, sorry.
That's not.
You can question me tonight, you can question me all day tomorrow, so, and on the day afterwards, so like.
No, the day afterward, no, because this is going to be a tour with me speaking. So
You can't question me the day after, so hit it hard tomorrow.
He just means socially.
Socially, yeah. If you're talking at any time, I will tell them that I've got to shut up, and then I'll take my breaks. Okay, so in this mushroom, it changes the dielectric constant, the physical vacuum, the permittivity of the vacuum. Speed of light goes up, time goes down, and electron interactions are completely weird. And so this can go through rock. That's giving you your answer there. And Ken Shoulders showed these structures going through alumina, which melts at 2070 degrees, causing a fluidized 20 micron channel with fully vitrified on the sides, came out at the top to beeswax, canuba wax, melts at 54 degrees. And it came out and it spread out underneath the canuba wax, the alumina, aluminium oxide. Impossible unless you have something that can completely change the way the electrons are holding that ceramic together. There we go. That's, I think, all enough. This is the caduceus. This is the sun and the moon. These are the energy flows coming in to the venerable stone and going up through the fire. This is the point of destruction here, which you can see everything on how it actually works in physical experiment. Absolutely everything. We even have, well, if you actually wait, look at the crown here. Look at the crown. And wait until it shows you what's in the tungsten. I'm going to go to the tungsten now. No, this is the vortex flow. You'll see how that looks like. Kind of come to the tungsten here. The crown is actually in this part here, where it's in the sheet. This is the Lamb of God or whatever. It's all in there, everything. So see what you can find out there in the city. I don't want to actually show you pictures of what you need to look for. And then there will be a prize of these original pieces.
What's doing? Oh, why is it moving?
Right, so what you can do here is you hit the set button and you choose the number of seconds you want it to run for.
But 150...
It doesn't need to be that. If you keep hitting set, it'll loop round the available options. 283, there, see? So 90 seconds. Well, you can always do multiple. You can see the dimples forming there. Now what happens is there is a standing wave set up between the transducer at the bottom and the top of the polycarbonate through the water column. And then after a while, the aluminium will move into a position in one of those standing wave nodes, and then transverse to that, you get the yin-yangs forming.
And these bubbles, what are they?
The bubbles actually probably are hydrogen.
Oh, hydrogen, okay.
And the hydrogen then feeds into the process, and it reinforces it. You see, they're starting to... It does not exist anymore, and is given as a great gift. It's in his own handwriting, recording parts of his life, where he worked at nuclear reactors. This is him at school somewhere here. He's in there somewhere. This is inside some of the reactor where he worked. Some of the experiments he worked on. So this man was a serious nuclear scientist before he became extremely serious about cold fusion. These are some of the linear accelerators that he worked on.
Do you want to clip this on, Bob? And I'll keep an eye on that direction.
J. Park. Photos used in his book, which are made of photo prints that he meticulously tiled. Look at that. That is the ball lightning. That is the tornado tail tearing through the copper.
Why is it yellow?
Why is it yellow? It's just how the light plays with the copper. These are carbon fibers that are spat out of the back of these structures. We've replicated this. Done before. A scientist actually gets credit, not in his lifetime, but for something that profoundly changes the course of humanity.
Looks like planets too.
So as above, so below.
Is that the sun? It looks like the sun.
Yeah.
So I also brought these little plasmoid ring examples you can play with. Basically a nice little toroidal form. They are interwoven in on themselves. So you get the lemon in the center, or the vesica within the center. And if you can find the hole through the center, you can do magic. So you see how this structure is very efficient and self-contained. So how it corresponds with aerodynamics and fluid dynamics so easily, and continuously folding in on itself. And the solitons that we were shooting, if you picture those counter-rotating spirals, they fold in on themselves and in on themselves, in on themselves. That's what keeps them self-contained. So they're moving in 3 axes of spin.
You want to go next? You're on their team. Right.
Okay. Performing. I got to make sure I stand back here. So you see the light in there? There's little teeny bubbles of light right now. Here we go. Okay, so this is a full reaction here. I'm going to try to control it. I'm going to try to keep it under control. But it will go right out of control here in a second. There it goes. There it goes.
That sound. Is it
Yeah.
angry?
Yeah, it's angry. And it's hungry. And I don't want to run it for too long, but
Yeah, I don't want that plasma.
after all those warnings, but let's just get one good one here. Here we go. And this reaction will run away on you. Eventually all that water will just explode out of there, so. But I think that's good. I can feel it. I can feel it really strong. So we're also emitting a lot of strange radiation. Do you feel